Welcome to Creating a Life in Music. My name is Mike Salo. I'm a guitarist and music educator from Minneapolis, Minnesota in the U.S., and I want to know how other musicians make their living, how they got there, how they sustain it, and most importantly, the insights and tips they may have for the rest of us. I interview musicians from all over the world, from various parts of the music industry to break down the question, how do I do music full time? So join me as we discover the many different ways to create a life in music. If you're a guitar player who's ever wanted to attend music college but couldn't because it's too expensive or too far away, or maybe you're just beyond that point in your life and you're just too busy with your own family and your own career to commit to something like that, I would highly recommend going and checking out fretboardbiology.com. At only $29 a month, Fretboard Biology takes out all the guesswork, putting the right things in the right order. It's highly structured, highly organized, college-level guitar program designed by one of the top guitar educators on the planet, Joe Elliott. Joe was head of the guitar department at McNally Smith for a number of years, where he designed the entire guitar curriculum, as well as being head over at Musicians Institute in Hollywood for many, many years. He knows what you need to know. And you can get 50% off your first month when you go to fretboardbiology.com/register-salo, my last name, that's S-A-L-O-W. So fretboardbiology.com/register-salo. Cool, man. I appreciate you being on.
For sure, man. It's cool. Now, do you know Ian Martin Allison or no? Are you
mutual friends? Okay. So we follow each other, I think, online, and he's from the cities, and we gig with a lot of the same people, and so someone was talking about him I was at a gig and they were saying, oh yeah, Ian, because they were talking about my social media stuff, and then his name came up because they were like, there's a bass player in town, Ian Allison, and I was like, oh yeah, I follow him, I know who that is, and they started talking about how he was gigging with you, and I was like, that I didn't know that, and then I went on just to look on Instagram, and then I gave you a follow because I wasn't following you on there, and then you hit me up right away, so I appreciate that. Very cool. Yeah, Ian's doing some really cool stuff online, working with Scott's bass lessons, and he kind of is doing a lot all of a sudden.
He is, and it's been cool. I've been playing with Ian now for we were just talking about it. I think it's going on 8 years or something. We've been playing together, and it's always been great, but then it was cool to sort of see it come together. Really during the pandemic, he was pretty low down, and he just really started leaning into the social media stuff, and just had a knack for it, and also an appetite and an excitement for it. And so it's been cool to see it building. And, we just did some shows together in California, and there's bass nerds out there to see Ian at the show, so it's cool. I mean, it's fun, and he's just the sweetest guy. So it's cool to see stuff working for him, except now he's just always badgering me to do more. You gotta do more social media.
Yeah. I mean, I was like, oh my God, Eric should have way more followers than this, because you deserve it. And you've been doing it for so long. And so how did you get to know Ian? I'm surprised I haven't actually came across or run into him at a gig or ended up playing with him. I've only just know of him from social media stuff and from mutual friends. But 8 years. So how long have you? I mean, did he move here later, or has he been here?
Yeah, he's from Montana. And he's been in the cities for a long time. I think at least 20 years or something. So I met him because I had a great multi-instrumentalist and good friend of mine named Elliot Blofis, who's a cities guy who's from Chanhassen originally. And he was playing with me and was my MD for years and years. And we had an opening for the bass player, and Elliot recommended this guy, Ian. And it was a good fit. And we did a lot of touring. We did a really big, outdoor shed tour opening for Kelly Clarkson in the summer of, I think, 2015. And those were, we did the XL Center in Minnesota, and we did the Staples Center and a bunch of outdoor places. So that was a real bonding time for our band, because we were being thrust into this massive thing. And, mainly as an opening act, your whole gig is just to stay out of the way and not go over your set time. And, but we were really having fun building the show big enough that it could reach the backs every arena and stuff like that.
Yeah, very cool. And so you guys are on a kind of short stint right now. I saw that you were touring, or you had like some, like maybe 6-7 dates you were doing within this month. So you're like going out in like 2 days again.
Yeah, I'm staying busy. I'm celebrating the 15th anniversary of my first album, which is the album's called Sounds Like This. And when I realized it was the 15th anniversary, I was like, I really want to do some shows around this. And partially, I think, because in 2008, when this album was blowing up and when things were really starting to happen for me, I was so obsessed with what was coming next, or what venue I'd play after this venue, or what can we sell out, or how can we do this, that I think I robbed myself of a lot of the joy and the enjoyment in real time. And so 15 years later, I'm revisiting these songs and playing them for people and really trying to be present up on stage and with what I do. So that's been like the real challenge for me, is just to appreciate whatever it is, just to appreciate that it's there and to sort of celebrate that I've been doing it for a long time, and that people are still coming out.
Yeah, man, that's great. And so you have that going on, and then.
But yeah, also to answer your other part of the question, I'm a dad now. I've got a 4.5-year-old daughter, and between that and the pandemic, I just don't tour the way I used to. At my height, I was touring 80% of the year or something. Mm-hmm. But now I'm really kind of doing more of the weekend warrior stuff. So I'm usually doing Wednesday through Saturday. I'll go out. And so it's ending up being about once a month or so. So it's enough that I can get out and visit people and see some shows, but also, I like to be home and around as a dad. So we've been trying to walk that line.
Yeah, I can imagine. And then home is that still in DC? Are you in that area?
I'm in Manhattan, New York.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
I've been here. I'm just 16 years now I've been up here. But yes, I'm originally from the DC area, and I'm an East Coast guy, I guess.
If you're a guitar player or bass player, you should really have a copy of Guitar Pro tablature software. I've been using Guitar Pro for like 15 years, and I really can't live without it. At this point, it's sort of an industry standard within the guitar education realm. And it's really easy to use. You can make all your licks and write out all your songs, and you can actually use it in conjunction with ultimateguitar.com, where you can download Guitar Pro files and learn all your favorite songs. So I couldn't recommend this software enough. And if you use the code MikeGP at checkout, you can get 10% off your copy of Guitar Pro 8. That's Mike, MikeGP, at checkout, guitar-pro.com. Yeah.
But I've been to Minneapolis so many times, the cities. The joke was always with my wife that if she didn't know where I was on tour, I was usually in Minnesota somewhere.
Really? Why is that?
I think in the beginning, I just got a lot of radio play and from Cities 97 and I think there was another station as well. And I don't know, people just took to my music and I've always just loved the cities for that. It's just, it's I don't have to tell you, but it's just great town and people really interested in the arts and in music. So just from the very beginning, I just started playing there a lot. I've played like every venue I think you can play in the area. So I'm always love it. And we're coming back to the Fine Line this fall. So that'll be good. Yeah,
I saw those tour dates. I'm bummed to say that I have a wedding on the East Coast, so we'll flip, actually.
All right, yeah, so perfect.
My girlfriend's sister is getting married, so I was like, well, I can't really skip that one. So
yeah,
I'll be in New York and you'll be here. So let's flip.
It happens. That's all good.
And it looks like you're a bit busier during that tour stint. Like I saw more, back-to-back tour dates. Is that more of a how many weeks in a row is that?
That's not even, it's still, I'm still kind of just doing these 4-day blocks and then we take a few days off and then we're doing 4 more. So with the band, the logistics certainly get harder. And there's definitely been people out there talking about, just especially after the pandemic, it's expensive to tour with the band. I'm doing a lot of shows solo, partially because I love it, but also because it does make it much easier. And especially when the pandemic was still really raging, it was, to be able to tour on my own was just that many less people that had to be testing positive and all that stuff. And just
I can imagine
less variables. So, but we're going to be doing 8 shows with the band in the fall. And I think we're going to add 4 more in the Midwest as well. But it just depends on when the right shows are there. But I really wanted to play kind of these cities I've been playing forever: Minneapolis, Chicago, Madison, Iowa, Des Moines, Iowa. Like I wanted to play those with the band, so we're making those work.
Yeah, very cool. So what I'm curious about, because the whole kind of premise behind this this podcast is really getting to know how someone has made and created a career in music. So that's, I really would be curious about kind of the whole backstory of how you started doing it and kind of how the progression of where you started to where you are now. And I know that's could be a long story, but I'd love to hear, and I know the people listening would love to hear kind of how you came about, doing music as a career. Like, so was this something that you knew from a young age, or was it as you got older, you're like, I'm pretty good at this and I have some connections and I can start to, record albums, and it seems to be more natural?
Well, I definitely never felt like I had any connections until like pretty recently, but,
Okay.
Yeah, I grew up in a very musical family. I wrote my first song when I was 8 years old, and was just always really interested in songwriting, and started playing guitar and piano, and had a guitar teacher that was like, you know what, we should really do some open mics. Like that'll be a fun way. Like you should share your music. It's not just for playing in your bedroom. And that really got me out into the world. And I went to college as a film major. I thought I was going to do writing and directing, and I was always doing music on the side. And then I just got more and more serious about the music, and I made up my own CD in college, and I was selling it out of my dorm room. And I remember it was sort of people I didn't know started knocking on my door saying like, hey, I heard you got that CD for sale. Like, could I buy one of those? And I started just feeling like, oh, people are maybe giving me feedback that like this could work. And, but I'm excited about your podcast because it's something I think is really interesting. It was part of why, I reached out right away. And it's also, I feel like I'm constantly fighting for musicians' rights and all of the rude things people will say to me at a party when
what?
I feel like whenever I just think that, there's some stigmas around musicians that they're dirty and they're late and they don't pay their rent. And, it's like, you don't want your daughter dating a musician. And I feel like my whole professional life has been flying in the face of that, of just like, no, it's possible to be a professional person who takes it seriously, and there's a craft to it, and you can make a living. And
yeah, it's a business like any other business. And if you can approach it with a business mindset and responsibly, you can definitely make a living in it. It's funny you say that. There's a comment that always just lives in my brain, probably from it was pretty recent. And it was something along the lines, I think it was and I think, what is crazy? I think it was at my grandpa's funeral, and it was and the comment was like, still doing the music thing? And I was like, yeah. It's like, well, if it doesn't work out, you can always come back and work for your dad. And I was like, I think I said, well, it's been working for 15 years, so I don't see that happening.
I hear that constantly still from people. People who will even say it, they think it's a compliment. They'll say, oh, you're pretty funny. If this music thing doesn't work out, you could always be a comic. And I'm like, well, I'm hoping the music thing's going to work out, like I'm planning on that. But yeah, people say it all. They always say it that way. Still doing the music thing? Like, yeah, we kind of thought you'd quit a while ago, And I just always bristle at that kind of stuff, just because I don't think it works the other way. You can't say that to other people, or people will straight out ask me, be like, "You're a musician, huh? You make a living doing that?"
Yeah,
and I'll be like, "You can't ask other people those kinds of questions, And people are usually just curious, I guess. But I'm just always like, in the very beginning, even I was just like, I feel like the musician thing's always like, hey, come play this gig. We're not going to pay you any money, but you get free beer and pizza. And I was like, no, I will take the money. I will decide if I buy beer or pizza with it, but I would like cash, that's how I like to get paid. So I feel like I'm always just interested in pushing for musicians' rights because, get taken advantage of a lot of the time because it's always for exposure and, there's that kind of stuff. So, I got off track a little bit, but
that's okay. Yeah, that's a great conversation to have. I think it's good points to be made because I've had a similar conversation with people. So I teach a lot, and I've had conversations with people about that. Like, I think one time I had a potential client So I own a in-home lessons company, and someone called and they were like, hey, I have 3 kids and we're wondering if you can come to the home for that. And I was like, oh yeah, here's our rates. Or it was my student coordinator gave the rates. And then they got back to us and they were like, ooh, that's way more than we used to get charged. We used to get charged like X amount. And it was like a quarter of what we charged. So I was like, who is charging you that? Like, that's ridiculous. Like, value yourself. There's a whole conversation there with like, it's funny. You're like, I will take the money, you keep the beer and pizza, and I'll decide if I want that with the money that you give me. That's a really good point. You're almost like, actually, I would like, please both, really. Yeah. Like, I'll
take some pizza, but I'm here to do my music and hopefully be able to afford to drive home afterwards. I mean, getting back to your original question, that's how it started for me. Was I got out of college. I really had no idea or contacts of how to get into the music world. I just liked it. And I was living in Boston after college. And I just said, you know what, I'm going to start playing the open mics. And I had done that a bit in LA and in New York. And I just started doing the open mics like 5 days a week, like showing up, getting the 10,000 hours, which we didn't call it that back then. We just called it getting better. But, I just did a ton of open mics. I was grabbing people's emails lists emails on my mailing list and just out there hustling a bunch, started being able to put together 40 people for a show in, New York or DC or something. And the other big thing was I was just begging for opening slots all the time. Anybody whose email address I could get, I was begging promoters and booking agents and artists directly. And I was just like, I would love to open up. I'll go anywhere as long as you can get me. Because at that point I was like, I was selling CDs. I was like, I know if I can get there and get in front of a crowd, I can sell a blank amount of CDs. I can build my following. So it was worth it to me. And the other part I did a lot was I started playing college shows, which paid really well. They were 90% terrible and soul crushing, but they paid the bills, which was a huge thing. And that's a big thing I always tell young artists is, and young musicians is I'm a big believer of not having a plan B. That like, it's easier said than done. But for me to get away from having a day job early was so important to me, because it's still to this day, it's what makes me have to keep working and being creative and thinking is, I have to say, okay, I've got to pay the bills and I've got to, be creative. And like, how do I put those two things together? But in the beginning, I would do these college shows that would be like I would play like a lunchtime show in the community college cafeteria, like in Altoona, Pennsylvania or something. And it was like, you'd show up and they'd be like, here's your stuff. I'd play, nobody would pay attention, but I'd get a check that was like what I could make in a week waiting tables. And then, I'd string a couple of those together. And then that gave me some freedom to then say, hey, I'll open for you, bigger artists, but I don't need to make money. I just want to be there. And so a lot of it was just stacking on top of each other and learning as I went. And, I think about it back in the day, it's like, I don't know what I was really thinking or that I actually thought it would work, but, it came together. And I think that's such a big part of it was I just got better as I kept going along. I've learned how to be on stage.
Yeah, for sure. And that was that like mid 2000s kind of, or early 2000s? Exactly.
That part I'm talking about there. Yeah. And then I ended up getting, and I always remember this, I don't know if you like, I'm behind the music.
Yeah.
On VH1, they'd always be like, Aerosmith was a band that playing college shows. And then they'd be like, a few months later, they were signed to Geffen Records. And I was always like, wait, that's the part I need. Like, how do we get the record deals? How do we find those people? But when it happened with me, it was a very similar thing of like, it kind of just happened. I was playing a bunch and then all of a sudden I was playing a show in LA and then somebody's friend had a friend who worked at a record label. And I got signed to this label, Maverick Records in 2005, which was owned by Madonna and was distributed through Warner Brothers. And I was just on there for a few months before it actually closed down completely. And I was just starting to work on my first album at the time. And I remember I got a call from my manager who said like, the label's frozen. They're trying to decide which acts to keep. It's going to take a while. You can't stay in your hotel tomorrow. You got to go home. Ugh. So it was It was pretty heartbreaking. And
how old were you?
I was 25,
okay.
and at that point I'd felt like I was doing it for a while, and I finally got my break, and I'd, said goodbye to all my loser people that I used to call my friends. And now I had to come back with my tail between my legs. And, so it was really hard. And I spent a lot of time thinking if maybe I should just pack it in. The record label gave me a check to pretty much cancel my contract. And it wasn't the most money in the world, but it was a lot more than I'd made in a check ever. And I started thinking, should I just take this and start whatever new chapter of my life? Should I, put a down payment on a house or something? But I eventually decided, no, I needed to make an album to scratch that itch, because I felt like if I went on with my life and I never actually made a proper album, I would just always regret it. So I ended up making this album independently. That became my first album, Sounds Like This. And then that ended up getting, again, through some random channels, it ended up getting some attention.
Yeah, very cool. So that first album, remind me, because there's the tunes that I'm very familiar with. Are they from that first album or the second album? Like Rock and Roll and...
Rock and Roll, Okay, It's All Right With Me, Food Chain, Outside Villanova. Those are all on the first record.
So that was completely, you did that on your own and then got signed afterwards to a new label after that.
Correct. I got signed to Warner Brothers Records, which was actually the label that had just dropped me, but they hadn't realized it.
Oh, so yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Yeah, because I was actually curious about that part of it. Like, was it so how did that scenario pan out? So you made a record on your own, funded it yourself, and then someone heard it, and then you got in touch with Warner Brothers, or did you send it out to different labels?
I finished this album, and I managed to connect with some, professional record people out in LA and in Boston through, at the time it was MySpace. This is how long ago this was, but I was connected with real people, and they were happy to charge me, full price to work with them and stuff. But so I was spending a lot of money making the album, and I finished it. And I just moved to New York, and I had just gotten together with my now wife, and I really had no plan of what to do with this album that I just felt like I had to make. And so I was playing more college shows to pay the bills and kind of just sending it to whoever I thought I might know. And the real break for me was a friend of mine from high school sent it to a guy named Perez Hilton, which was a celebrity blogger.
Yeah, I know who that is.
And he loved it and put it up on his site, and it reacted like instantly, like overnight. It jumped my album up to like the top 5 of iTunes. And then all of a sudden there was like all these people coming out of the woodwork to want to be a part of what I was doing, who had been avoiding my calls for a long time. And I ended up in a little mini bidding war, which was really insane. And I ended up signing with Warner Brothers and doing the major label thing for a while.
Yeah, that's super. Oh, that was weird. It just cut out for a second there. So then from there, that's when the heavy touring began?
Yes, that was, then I had label tour. I mean, I was already touring a ton. I wasn't making much money, but I was, even before Warner Brothers, I was on the road a lot. And then once I got onto Warner Brothers, and I just said yes to anything and everything I could, so that was radio tours and opening acts. And I remember like I said, I was out on the road 80% of the year. I'd be finishing up a 6-week tour, and then they'd call and say, we got another one for you. And I'd have to call my girlfriend, who's now my wife, and say, hey, I'm actually not coming home. Oh. And, it was exciting times, but it was, looking back on it, certainly my work-life balance was not in check. I didn't have much of a personal life. I was just always gone and always on the road. And I had my road dogs and my band and stuff, but it was an important time too, I think, of just out there grinding, making fans, making friends, and again, getting better, learning how to do it, learning how to handle any kind of crowd. And I'm proud of all that stuff. It was a lot. And there was some fun times, but like I said, it was also like I would be kind of just like exhausted and depressed and confused and all the things I was before I got signed to a label, you know? So, but so I was on the label for a couple years, and then I've gone back to being independent, which is really, I think, always been my streak. Is I'm more indie minded. I like being hands-on. I like being able to maneuver quicker, and I like being in charge, you know? So there's some trade-offs, but I'm enjoying doing the indie thing.
Yeah. And I've noticed, I feel like with a lot of musicians, there's something about doing it on your own that I think is very appealing to many creatives. Because I know I'm that way with everything I do. I'm just like, I'll just do it myself, and I'd rather just do it myself and approach it that way. So you were signed to them for 3 years, and then did you decide, like, the contract's up, I'd rather just do it on my own?
Oh, I wish. No, I made a second record with them, which took a long time, and you know, all the sophomore slump problems, and by the time it came out, it had been 4 years since the last record, and we did that for a while. Like, I was still there for like another year, and then they just cut me loose, and I was surprised, honestly, but went out and made another record, and it just kept moving. So I look back on it. I mean, financially, there were some great parts to being on the label, and there were a lot of great people that I met, but for me personally, I feel like that time was a lot of red tape and a lot of like very slow moving and having to get everybody on board and having to do this thing. And then once you decide you're going to do it, it's going to take 10 months. And I just get bored faster than that, I think. And I like being a little more nimble. So I don't know. That's my story, at least. Who knows if I'm telling the truth or not.
I'll take you for your word.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So you did that. So when you started the heavier touring, was that later touring, like 2008, 2009, and then you went to about 2016 of like heavy touring? Is that about right?
That's about right. And that's around there was one of my many times where I thought maybe I was quitting music. I was telling my friend about it. He's like, you try to quit music a lot. I'm like, yeah. I was just talking to a good singer-songwriter friend of mine yesterday who's, you know, he's burnt out on the road, and he's like, I'm pretty sure you were calling me at one point with this advice, but I'd like to get it back from you here. It can, you know, the creative process, I find it really challenging, and it's hard. It's such a huge part of it to me is feeding the creative inspiration and giving it time to regrow and to feel connected to it. And when I'm doing it at all times, it's hard to continue that. I like the quote about nothing in nature blooms year round. And so I like this idea that like you can't be harvesting 24/7. You know, there's got to be a time where you're resting. There's got to be a time where you're collecting new ideas or inspiration. There's got to be a time when I'm just designing what might happen next. There's got to be a time where I execute. So that's been a big learning curve for me, is just learning the different seasons of my professional life. And it's you know, I didn't know musicians growing up, really. Like, I didn't know, my grandmother was actually she was a professional viola player, but she did like wedding gigs. But then her really cool gig she had was she got hired when like big acts would come through town, they'd hire string sections in each town. So she played with like Aretha Franklin and Ray Charles and Tony Bennett and all these people. But she couldn't help me, like, when I was actually trying to, like, you know, she was a local, and she tried to talk me out of becoming a musician. She was like, it's hard. I don't want you to do this. Get a day job. But all this to say, I didn't know anybody had all the adults I knew growing up had 9-to-5 jobs, and they worked and they had salaries. And I feel like the challenge for me for so long in my life was feeling that I was doing okay, even though it didn't look like what I thought a quote unquote adult life was supposed to look like. Like, hey, how come I'm allowed to go to a movie in the middle of the day? That sounds like slacking off, as opposed to just, no, my hours are different.
One of the best things you can do as a musician is to protect your own hearing. I've been using these Eargasm high fidelity earplugs for months now, and I really love them. They're nice and discreet, high quality, and they don't make any of the sound muffled. They let in the right frequencies that I need on gigs or at shows. You can get 10% off your order if you use code MSALO10 at checkout. That's my first initial M, my last name Salo, SALOW 10 at checkout to get 10% off your order at eargasm.com. Yeah, that was that's funny you bring that up, because that's, I think, something a lot of people struggle with. I mean, I know friends who've had great gigs, and at some point something with it, even though it was a good gig, it just was weighing on them to where maybe the pay compared to the work wasn't really calculating correctly, and I know many friends, including myself. I mean, I think I rethink my path like at least once a year.
Yeah, I'm like, I think that's healthy though. That's a recalibration as far as I'm concerned. You know?
Yeah, like once a year, it's just like, oh, this is really fucking hard right now, and I don't know if I want to keep doing this. And then you see, or like, you know, I had a friend recently who unfortunately got laid off, but he was like, oh, I got laid off. I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And he was like, yeah, you know, I got 3 months of whatever, not pension, but whatever it's called, of pay. Severance, yep. And I was just like, what? Like, no way. I was like, what? I kind of don't feel bad for you now. You know what I'm saying? Because like, I mean, if my stuff goes away, it's just like gone. Like I'm just, you know, it's just
yeah.
gone.
And I do think my dad was a contractor, and so I grew up around carpenters, and you know, he was building houses, and in a lot of ways I see what I do as a similar thing, where it's like I have the song idea, but then I need all of the people that actually know how to do these things to come in and build the song. And I think of musicians so much as that, if we're, you know, just craftsmen and artisans, and so much of the music world is living hand to mouth, you know, play song, get money, eat dinner. And but it is, to your point, I think when you don't have, I think somebody else can have an existential crisis while they're currently on salary, and maybe I'm maybe I'm phoning it in for a couple of months here at work. I'm going to stick it out while I apply for other jobs or something. But there's still the income coming in. Whereas, you know, for you and I, it's like if you don't have a plan, it can feel like you're running out of runway kind of quickly.
Yeah, totally. Because you're in charge of that runway, and there's no, you know, you're not working for anyone to kind of keep everything afloat, because you could stick in a job for a long time and just kind of be totally just falling off. And it's not like nothing really changes. Pay stays the same. As soon as I start to fall off, all of a sudden, you know, clientele goes down, or certain things just start to waver and fall off. And then all of a sudden, you know, in a month from now, I could be making a decent amount less. And something's going on with my audio, but
I also think that's sort of the nature of freelancing. And my wife is a freelance costume designer, so we you know, a lot of musicians I know, they're lucky to be anchored to someone who's got some sort of a more stable 9-to-5 kind of job, gets benefits, things like that. You know, that's a really important part of it. You know, when I first started out, and I still have to remind myself every January that like the world's not ending. It's just slow around January, you know, like things take a while to speed up. And this was the first year that, like, I used to, in the old days, I'd be like, well, it's December, I better really rev up hard to make sure there's enough to do in January, even though the whole world around me is shutting down for the holidays. And I'm like, no, I'm going to send those extra emails. I'm going to try and do that extra stuff to just kick this along. And this was the first year where I really was like, I'm going to not, because this is what this time is for, is to rest. I'm not going to get anything done, and I'm just going to trust that there'll be things to do in the new year when I turn back on my email. And I managed to do it pretty successfully. I was proud of myself, because there's, you know, certain triggers during the year and things like that. And that's the other side of the coin of getting to work for yourself. It's like, I don't feel like I could ever do anything else, but some days I'm like, yeah, it'd be nice to have someone else just tell me what to do and, you know, what I'm good at, and, you know, but I feel lucky to get to do this, and I always love getting to hear how different people make it work.
Yeah, it's it's interesting because it's funny that you just said that. Like, sometimes I just want someone else to tell me what to do and I'll just do it. Cause I think that thought all the time, just like, oh, I just wish I wouldn't have to just be making all the decisions all the time. Cause and have that would be nice. But then every time I go down that road, there's always that realization of like, what are you going to do, idiot? Like, what are you going to do? Like, you're going to go like, so I look into different options. It's like, oh yeah, if I'm pretty far in this at this point, I'd really kind of have to start over doing something different and really actually probably take a pay cut for a bit. Yeah. And so then you start to have those realizations. It's like, okay, and I really like this. This is actually pretty cool. But
I think that's important. It's like, that's a little bit of the grass is greener situation to me that, that's something I have to remind myself too, is I have no doubt that if I quit music today, 6 months from now, whatever I ended up doing, I'd be like, well, should I be doing this? I don't know. Maybe I should be being a librarian. I don't know. So like, I think there's always just, especially with social media, I think it's made it even more so that like you're aware of everything else that's going on in the world. And, I've struggled because the music, the world of it, the rock star life or whatever, it just didn't look exactly how I had sort of imagined it would. And that was really surprising to me. And it took a while to start to understand that, like, right, there's, sometimes when I'm cleaning out my storage unit and moving some vinyl around or whatever, I'm like, I wonder if Bono ever cleans out his own storage unit here. But I think in a good way, I've started to appreciate that. Like I said, I like the indie thing. I like being on the ground floor. I like that after my shows, I can meet the people that came to the show and say hi to them at the merch and actually hear their personal story about what the music means to them. Like that's something Harry Styles is not able to do. It's like a different level of, and you're disconnected from some of that. So, I mean, in the end, I'm kind of still a door-to-door salesman.
Yeah. I think there's something really unique, I think, and special about that, being able to actually talk to fans and not feel like, and feel like you can, and have them. It creates this closer connection that they might not be able to get with other artists, and I think that's something that people hugely appreciate. And but yeah, so you took like a little bit of a break there for like 4 years, and now you're back at it.
It didn't end up being that long. Like I had a whole show where I ended my tour in DC, where I'm from, and I invited a bunch of family and friends out. I was like, this could be it for a while. And then as soon as I truly allowed myself to think I'm not going to make music anymore, I'm going to figure something else out, I felt a lot of love for music come back to me. And Dr. J, the basketball player, he's got a line I like where he says, being a professional is doing what you love when you don't feel like doing it. And like, I think it's a great way to put it a lot of times. I'm so lucky to make music. And I hope people hearing this aren't thinking I'm coming off as ungrateful at all, because I'm so lucky to do it. And the older I get, the more I appreciate how anything's gone my way is just amazing. But also there's every job has the parts where you're like, this is part of the job. This is why it's a job. But, I don't know. I lost my train of thought. I was getting to something really good though. But I just, I'm personally always I'm getting more and more thankful as I get older. I think when I was young, I felt like I was entitled to something, or like, I wanted to be the Beatles, so I should be the Beatles, and everything in my way, get out of the way, and now I look back and I just think, wow, like, what an amazing path I've gotten to walk.
Yeah. And so you were saying you had that moment where you thought maybe you were going to stop in like 2016, and then
there we go. So I walked away from it, and I thought I'm going to retire. My wife kept saying, don't say you're retiring, because you're not going to mean it in 6 months or whatever, and she was right. As soon as I stopped putting pressure on it, I felt a lot of love and creative juices come back. And I ended up making this record called Modern Happiness, which is one of my favorites. And I made that with Ian Allison playing bass and my touring band. And the next couple of projects I've done have really just been for me, where I felt like, I hope other people like these, but I need to just go towards what feels really interesting to me. So my projects have been a lot more personal, I would say, probably less poppy. I've experimented with Americana music, jazz, alternative rock, folk music. And so I've been kind of bouncing all over, but it's been fun to me. I think I'm working on an ambient project idea next. So, I think I was just feeling a little stifled of like, I'm supposed to do what people want from me, as opposed to what do I actually want to do as an artist.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a challenge for a lot of people. And especially once you go so far down a certain road, it can be even more challenging, because I've had conversations with a lot of different musicians who have the same thing where they're like, this is the thing that I do. But there's so many other things I'm interested in writing and creating. And sometimes I envy people who really have it figured out to the point where they're like, yeah, this is all I like. I'm just going to do this all the time. And I'm like, God, I wish I had that, because it would just make everything easier.
Yeah. I used to feel a lot of guilt about that, because like my MD, Elliot, who was on the road with me, we'd do a gig, and then as soon as we were done, he'd be out the door trying to find like the local music spot, and he'd be up on stage sitting in with these people. And I just want to go to bed. And, I'm like, God, he's just so a musician, he's such a musician. And years later we talked about it, and he was like, I always felt bad because you had like something you were interested in besides just music, So I think it's the grass is always greener, and there's no right way to do it. If you want to eat, sleep, and breathe music, that's amazing. For me, I need some breaks to come back to it really refreshed.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. It's very difficult. I have the same kind of thing where it's very difficult to, for me to continue down the same. I almost need like just variety. I need a lot of variety in my life, because if I start like right now, I'm really heavy in the social media thing. And I gotta be honest, like it's been over a year of like really heavy into it. And I'm like, every day is a struggle to like try to keep the momentum going. And, even with this podcast, I knew going in, I was like, I need to do seasons. Like I need to make it a seasons thing. I can't make it a continual thing. I'll go nuts. Because I know that's how I am with a lot of other stuff. I have these like seasons, like you said before, where it's like, I don't want to say bored. It's just like the variety thing. It's like, I can do the social media thing for a bit. And then it's like, all right, now I need to maybe make some music for a bit, and then I can kind of back off that and then do this for a bit, whatever.
Yeah. But I think that's how we're meant to be as humans. That's something I talk to younger people about a lot, is the work-life balance. And luckily I think our culture has really caught up to that a lot more, and is talking about a lot more. But I think a lot about like, I make a vision board now, man. I'm crazy, but I think about my life as a table with 4 legs, and I got my music leg, I got my family leg, I got whatever leg, I got whatever my 4 legs are, and if one leg gets way too long, the table's going to be uneven, everything's going to slide off of it. So I'm constantly trying to think about like, how do I keep things balanced? And to your point, that is having some variety in my life, and not going too far in one direction, because that is how I burn out. I just do one thing constantly. It's burnout. Yeah.
Do you have those moments too, where I know I do this, and where the reason I think I do burn out is because I do this variety thing, and I get super hyped up on the thing I'm focused on, and that hype stays for a bit. And I'm like, I'm not going to burn out on this. I'm just going to go to just beat the hell out of it for the next how many months. And then all of a sudden I'm just like, and you could have talked to me 2 months, 3 months prior, and I'd have been like, no way I'm going to burn out doing it like this. I'll be fine, because this is great. Everything is going really well. And then you're just like, oh yeah, I'm doing too much of this.
I mean, again, using the farmer analogy or something of like, or the blooming analogy, it's like, if you can plant seeds, which are exciting, and then you start harvesting, but at some point there's nothing left in the ground. You've got to like let it, it's like to your analogy, I'm just a farmer out in the fields hacking through December being like, why don't I have any more? And, and again, I hope it's not coming off bitter or anything more. Like I said, I never had anyone to learn from. It felt like I didn't know people that had lives like this. And so it took me so long. I always felt like I was doing things wrong as an adult because I didn't have a 9-to-5 job. I didn't have a car. I still don't have a car right now. And like, there was just a lot of things that felt like that's when I know I'm an adult, that sometimes, which is part of why people go towards music sometimes, I think, to like, avoid growing up. But it was confusing to me and tricky. And I would say like, oh, I'm not an adult. Or people would pull that line. Did they ever say that to you? Like, you're out with them and they say like, well, I got to go home. Some of us have real jobs. Oh, wow. I mean, I don't know if I've heard that. I've heard that being said before. Like I taught at a music college in town, similar to Berkeley, and that was a for-profit. It went under. And then the girl I was with at the time said, well, now you can go look for a real job or Ouch. Something like that. And I was like, it wasn't very nice in the it's like, just lost my job and now I'm supposed to, like, what are you talking about? Anyway, yeah, that's, and I think that's an important part though too I'm assuming you're not still with that person. No. Yeah, that's sort of indicative of maybe she doesn't quite get your lifestyle fully. But to my wife's credit, and to a lot of musicians partners credits, I know, like, they have to understand that it's who you are, and my wife really never tried to hold me back from doing something that sounds important. And, as long as we communicate about it and as long as there's a plan, my wife understands it's who I am, which is such a huge thing. Cause I've had girlfriends and things that it was, okay, now it's time to get home and now it's time to, why didn't you call me at this time or whatever else? And it does take some flexibility and trust, Yeah, it's hugely important. I think a lot of people wonder about the relationship thing as a musician, because I know I did when I was coming into like approaching music full time, and I know I've had other people talk about it. And I think I've thought about it a lot. And for a while there, when I was in the dating scene and doing music full time, I had this like insecurity of like, well, like I've dated this person and they don't seem to understand this lifestyle. I'm doing something wrong. I shouldn't be doing music. Maybe I shouldn't. But then you come to the realization of like, well, the same thing occurs with other positions. Like, there are plenty of jobs out there, the marketing jobs or sales jobs, where they're traveling and they have to do certain things, and it could be the same exact reaction. You're traveling all the time. Yeah. People that work in hospitals and they're working nights and things. Yeah. At some point you have to decide, what works for your lifestyle. And also, like, do you want to still do that? Because sometimes being on the road a ton when you're 20s makes a lot more sense than it does in your 60s or whatever, So it depends. But yeah, that's, again, I'm not, I don't feel like, I hope it doesn't sound like complaining and more of just kind of commiserating or something, because it is a part of the job or the part of my life that is interesting. A lot of the people in my life, I don't have a ton of musician friends actually. So like, I don't really just hang out and just say, oh yeah, like we're changing the world. It's like most of my friends have 9-to-5 jobs and things. And so again, it can feel like I'm just kind of out there floating, doing whatever. And I have to remind myself a lot and in therapy and say, but actually I've done pretty well for myself. Yeah. I'm getting by. I'm not some sort of a fraud or so. Yeah. I mean, you've done very well for yourself. I mean, like I told my girlfriend you were coming on and she was like, what? She's like, I know him. And I was like, yeah. She's like, I remember all those songs. And then they were watching, I don't know. They were watching a movie and one of your songs came on, and that was like a week ago. So she was like, oh, he's nice. So yeah, you've been doing some really cool stuff, man. So yeah, I know it's really, I think it's really great that you're actually sharing this stuff, because it really shows, what it's actually like. Because I talk about this stuff all the time, and, with students and with people online and with people on my Patreon and stuff. And I think it's an important thing to point out, because there's a lot of things you don't think about that you have to deal with. I mean, even I have friends who are
have really good paid gigs, and it would be a similar conversation. You know what I mean? And like where they're like, even not music stuff, you could talk to someone I have a friend who's a really, really high up in sales, makes really good money. Every time we converse, he's like, I'm like really just jealous. I really would like to be doing music full time. He's actually in one of my bands, and he's a lead singer, and he's really talented. And he's sales. He does sales, does really well, makes really good money. But he's always like, God, I wish I could be doing music full time. And I'm like, dude, you make so much in sales. Like what? And he's like, I don't know, man. It's just like, ugh. And so, everyone has their pitfalls.
The grass is greener but yeah, and also I should say, if people are still listening to me, that I've had a bunch of amazing experiences too. And so like, I'm kind of laying into the stuff that can get under my skin, but it's a trade-off. But I think a huge part is identifying what matters to me, and like that changes over time. Like I said, I've been doing this vision board once a year with my wife, which I'm finding is really informative. It's just taking some time. You don't have to do that and get fully juju about it, but like I'm finding taking some time to actually reflect on what's working and what I would like to change, or how have I grown and what do I want to do differently. And, the type of music I might have wanted to make is not necessarily what I want to do today. And I think especially when you're starting out, knowing what kind of musician you want to be and what kind of adult you want to be is so important, because it's like that informs a lot of decisions. Okay, am I going to be a person that plays every gig and knows how to play every kind of music? Great. Or am I going to be like a shredder that just plays one thing and that's my thing and I'm the best at it? Like that's a different path. It's like, for me, it was a lot about like, do I want to go pop? Do I want to be, more broad? Do I want to be more specific? How close can I be to myself and still appeal to other people? And I mean, that's still always up in the air, but I like to think I've gotten a lot closer to being my authentic self in my music. And I like to think that's what people like about it.
Yeah, for sure, man. Well, hey, I know it's getting close to the hour mark. Oh, my audio is being weird today for some reason. Never done this. But yeah, I appreciate you being on, and this has been a great conversation. So I don't want to keep you if you got other stuff you got to keep going to.
No, I appreciate it. This was fun. And like I said, I this is stuff I like to talk about. And I do think we need to have musicians know more about it. It's also just, it's community. It's a place of like, right. If oftentimes I've just felt very alone, and there's a nice reminder of how many other people are out there doing the thing and living the victories, but also feeling the real parts of it too, So.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of my favorite things about these conversations is I always feel actually pretty rejuvenated afterwards because of the same thing. Like, I only have so many friends in town that I talk to on a regular basis that do music. So it's always great to talk to people and actually just like get the thoughts out and then have like relate and everything and be like, oh yeah, I mean, there's the good and the bad, and it's good to discuss it and talk about it. And it helps to rejuvenate. I think I kind of feel like more like just the way you're talking about, like even just like taking breaks and seasons and stuff. I have to remind myself of that constantly. My girlfriend's really good about it. She'll be like, you need to take a break. Why don't we like she was like, you really need to go to NAMM this year. Like so she's like, you should go, like, you'll feel really rejuvenated, like just go. And I decided not to, but
what does she know?
Yeah. I decided not to, because I was like, well, what really decided, I was like, okay, I have some money set aside. And then like I had my car, went to the shop, had to drop like hundreds of dollars. I was like, well, there goes that. And so whatever. So it's supposed to be nice. Really, the reason was to get out of the crap weather here and get somewhere nice. And it's supposed to be in the 70s all the rest of the month. So we're good to go.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, those ideas of like taking breaks and knowing when to take breaks, I think is something I have to constantly remind myself of.
I find I have to plan them, honestly. Like I got to put them in the calendar of like, I'm not going to work that week, or I'm taking that day off, because otherwise I'll just schedule myself. I'll keep working. So I find just like I schedule my shows and things, I got to be like, I'm not working that week. And that's
I do the same thing.
And I have to protect it because I'm always, that's good. That's good to know people do that besides me.
Yeah. I have to. I mean, if I don't, I will work. Like
Right.
if I don't really plan it, like I will, I'll disappear into the basement and my girlfriend will be like, where'd you go? I thought you were taking the day off. And it's like, oh no, I gotta do some stuff.
Yeah. Which is still also, that's the fun part is when you have an idea you're locked into, there's not enough time in the day. And like, it's super fun, and going down that rabbit hole is why I fell in love with the stuff in the first place. Like, so it's just a matter of like making time for it to be fun and not getting lost in the wrong parts of it. So
yeah, the rest thing really rejuvenates. The rest thing and vacations, like every time I do one, it's like I come back just like ready to go, and then I have to remind myself like you need another one. Like you need another break, because right now I'm feeling that actually I should have took the NAMM advice, but I didn't. But I got a couple of days off this week, so.
All right. Well, I hope you take them. I hope you take them.
Yeah, right. I will. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you being on, man. Anything you'd like to, talk or quickly promote or anything before we get off the recording here?
Like I said, I'm celebrating the 15th anniversary of my album Sounds Like This. I'm doing shows all 2023 and maybe even a little into 2024, because we've been really getting great feedback. So come check me out. Follow me on Instagram. I don't have enough followers. And I'm just out there. Check me out and see, maybe you like me. Who knows?
Yeah. All right, cool. And I'll post some stuff on the description here so people can check out your website and stuff and all the socials and everything too as well.
Sounds good. Thanks, Mike.
Cool, man. I appreciate you being on here.
Thank you.
All right, man. Have a good one.
All right. Bye.
If you'd like to join my Patreon to get your questions answered by the guests, then you can go to patreon.com/Mike Salo. There are several tiers there that you can take part in, and lots of different perks like pre-recorded guitar lessons or even one-on-one guitar lessons with me. There are live masterclasses every week for certain tiers. And again, you can go to patreon.com/Mike Salo to check that out.